how did it come to this point? That's the question. A desperate voice recorded in the pitch dark. And to figure out the answer, well, we have to rewind. We have to go all the way back to the beginning.
We're gonna dive into a story that is seriously chilling. It's about a job that seemed way too good to be true, and the absolutely horrifying rules that came with it. And it all kicks off with one night guard and a single choice that was born out of pure desperation.
See, a story like this, it always starts with someone who's in a really tight spot, you know? Someone who feels like they've got their back against the wall with absolutely no other way out.
And in our story, that someone is a guy named Jason. He's just 22 years old, kind of shy, a student who's absolutely buried in textbooks and even deeper in debt. I mean, while all his friends are out there, making memories, Jason's just trying to stay afloat. He's applying for job after job and just getting rejected over and over. He was seriously at his breaking point.
And then, just when things couldn't get worse, he saw it. An online ad that honestly looked like a miracle. It was for a night guard position at this place called the Science Search Institute. And the pay? It was unbelievably high for what sounded like the easiest job in the world, literally just watching security cameras. So, ignoring every single red flag that should have been popping up, he applied right then and there.
The interview was, well, it was odd, to say the least. The guy doing the hiring, this cold, sharp-looking man named Mr. Scared, he barely asked any questions. He kind of just stared at Jason. And then he hired him, right on the spot. But there was one weird condition. No matter what happened, he was not allowed to quit for 3 weeks. But Jason was so desperate for the cash, he disagreed. He signed the contract without a second thought.
So Jason shows up for his very first shift. He gets to the security booth and finds an envelope sitting there on the desk, just waiting for him. And inside that envelope, just a single sheet of paper. A piece of paper that was about to turn this simple job into an absolute fight for his life.
Okay, so the rules start off pretty normal, right? Lock the door. Okay, makes sense. Don't sleep on the job. Check. But then they just get bizarre. Like, hide from whistling? What? Flee a faceless man? And what in the world is this black liquid that he has to avoid by not touching the ground? I mean, come on. So you can imagine Jason reading this list over and over, just trying to wrap his head around it. A faceless man? This has to be a joke, right? Some kind of twisted prank they pull on the new guy. He actually laughed it off, put the rules to the side, and just focused on the monitors. He needed this job, bad, and he wasn't about to let some dumb joke scare him off. And for a whole week, nothing. Just silence. The monotony was actually kind of comforting, you know? Jason started to relax. He was totally convinced the rules were just some weird prank. But then came the 8th night, and the joke was over. It all started really subtly. The lights in the hallways just started to flicker a bit. And then a figure popped up on one of the monitors, just walking down a totally deserted corridor. It was a tall figure wearing a white lab coat. So Jason leans in closer to the screen, thinking, okay, it's just a researcher working late, no big deal. But as this figure gets closer and closer to the camera, Jason can finally see its face, or where its face should have been. It was just a blank, totally smooth surface of skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. And this cold dread just washed over him. This wasn't a glitch in the camera. This was real. And this faceless thing, it starts moving, right towards his security booth. Jason's hands are shaking as he's fumbling for his phone to call for help. But before he can even dial a number, boom. Every light, every single monitor, everything goes black. He's plunged into complete and total darkness, with nothing to protect him but the memory of those impossible, horrifying rules. In the pitch black, his mind is racing, and he remembers the list. Rule number 3, if you see the faceless man, run to the electrical room. So he just bolts from the booth, his footsteps echoing in this awful, terrifying silence. He finally finds the room, slams the door shut, his heart just hammering in his chest, and that's when he hears it. A high-pitched whistling starting up right outside the door. He'd just escaped one horror, only to be trapped by another. Somehow Jason survived that night, but something inside of him, it just broke. The Institute wasn't just a weird job anymore, it was a prison. And those rules, they were the only thing keeping him alive.
I mean, his mental state just plummeted. You can see it here in this timeline. It's a horrifying descent. That first week, he was just a little uneasy, right? But by week 3, he was a total shell of his former self, just completely consumed by paranoia. Every little flicker of the lights, every creak in the walls would send him into a full-blown panic. Sleep? Yeah, that was completely out of the question.
You know, he'd catch his own reflection in the dark monitor screens, and he wouldn't even recognize the person staring back at him. His face was gaunt, pale, his eyes just wide with this permanent look of sheer terror. This job wasn't just scaring him anymore, it was literally consuming him, piece by piece. But he held on. He was driven by this one single thought. He only had to survive for 3 weeks. And finally, his last night arrived. Freedom was just a few hours away. He was almost there. Late into his final shift, he hears a knock at the door, and a voice comes through. It's Mr. Scard's voice, saying he forgot something inside. Jason is so relieved, he starts to unlock the door. But then, he just happens to glance at one of the monitors that's still working, and his blood just runs cold. Because on that screen, he can see the real Mr. Scards walking away from him down a totally different hallway. The voice at his door, it wasn't Mr. Scard.
It was a trick. The creature, it could mimic voices. As the door swings open, the faceless man fills the entire doorway. It's impossibly tall, and its featureless head just kind of tilts to the side. He's trapped. There is absolutely nowhere to run. So Jansen does the only thing he can think to do. He pulls out a tiny voice recorder from his pocket and presses record.
And just like that, Jason was never seen again. The Institute itself was eventually abandoned, its dark, terrible secrets just left to rot inside its decaying walls.
Fast forward, 15 years go by. Jason's story just fades away, becoming nothing more than a ghost story. You know, a local legend about the old abandoned institute, a place only the foolish, or maybe the very brave, would ever dare to enter.
And that's where Blake comes in. He's 16, an urban explorer type, a kid who loves a good dare. He breaks into the old institute and, of course, finds his way to that same derelict security booth. And there, buried under almost 2 decades of dust and debris, he finds it, a small cassette voice recorder.
Curious, he presses play. After a loud burst of static, a terrified voice suddenly fills the small room. The voice sounds weak, but it's so urgent. And it ends with this one final chilling warning. They aren't human. They are monsters. And then, just a scream, and the recording cuts out.
Blake just laughs. He thinks, wow, what a well-made prank, left here specifically to scare kids like him. He slips the recorder into his pocket, getting ready to explore deeper into the building. And that's when he hears it. A faint, almost melodic whistling sound coming from just down the hall. So I have to ask, what do you think happens when a new player enters the game, but this time they don't know any of the rules?